I'm the guy at parties who ruins the mood by putting a sticker over your laptop camera. People laugh until I tell them why. This is the story I never stopped carrying. The night I learned how many strangers there are in the room when you're sure you're alone. I'm 32 now and work in incident response. I speak in acronyms, read logs for a living, and send emails that begin with "per our last notice." I did not arrive here by career day. I arrived because when I was a dumb kid with too much internet and not enough supervision, I clicked on the wrong page and walked into a place that still changes how I sit in front of any lens. No jump scares, no Hollywood twist, just a quiet shock that never stopped echoing. It started in the most ordinary way. Boredom, the summer before 10th grade, the paneled den at my mom's house, and a wheezing laptop that could melt ice just by running Flash. I was wandering where bored kids wander, aimless clicks, drifting tabs, curiosity pretending to be confidence. One thumbnail on a search page looked like a model site I had no business visiting. I hovered, hesitated, and then because hesitation isn't a skill you have at 15, I clicked. The site loaded into a grid of live windows. It looked like a storefront for webcam performers. Tiling, chat sidebar, account of viewers. But the longer I stared, the stranger it became. Almost no one in the windows looked at the camera. No smiles to the audience, no gestures for tips, no overlays. Just people existing. Top left, a kitchen. Fluorescent lit, a man in a t-shirt scrubbing a pan. 2 tiles over, a living room with a TV running a cartoon. A kid darted through to grab a marker. 9 rows down, an empty crib under a mobile. In the corner, a dim bedroom where someone's back rose and fell with sleep. None of them were performing. No one checked a chat. No one adjusted a ring light. Life just happening. Lit the way real rooms are lit, with shadows that don't flatter anyone. I scrolled, waiting for the punchline. The chat flew by, not like the fever flurry of tips, but with the cold commentary of spectators who aren't there for the people, just for the fact of seeing. There were emojis and jokes, usernames that looked like throwaway throwaways, and sentences that said the quiet part out loud. They don't know. A pinned banner offered a list of countries, and the mod log looked like whack-a-mole in 5 languages. One rule sat on its own line. No addresses in chat. My skin went cold in that slow way that means your brain is working faster than your body. It clicked for me in a small square I almost scrolled past. A desk, a spiral notebook open under a study lamp. A girl, my age, maybe a bit younger, scribbled a title at the top of a page. Geometry. She chewed a pen cap, looked over her shoulder at a hallway, not at the lens, then put her headphones back in and kept writing. The camera was above and slightly behind her, the angle of a laptop lid no one thinks about when they're doing homework. I knew that posture because I had that posture. It didn't feel like a show, it felt like being watched without knowing. I backed out. I closed the laptop hard enough to make it whine. I stood in my own den and stared at the black TV screen, which reflected me back as a stretched ghost. I told myself I'd misread it. I told myself it was some elaborate ARG. I told myself anything true except the thing that felt truest. Someone had assembled a theater out of unprotected cameras and invited the internet to sit in the dark. I didn't sleep well. When I did sleep, I dreamed in grids. The next morning, I did what panic always does once it cools down. Research. I reopened the page and forced myself to look with a different brain, the one that cares about source code and headers and what a network says to itself when people aren't listening. The site was a patchwork, a thin layer of HTML feeding embed players that pointed all over the place. Some tiles looked like laptops, streaming over WebRTC. Others were IP cameras, brands I recognized from hardware stores, talking RTSP over exposed ports, stripped of their login pages by some sloppy proxy that wrapped them in a friendly skin. If you've never fallen into that rabbit hole, here's the cruel simplicity. Lots of connected cameras ship with default passwords like admin/admin or no password at all. Lots of routers politely open doors for whatever asks. Thank you, UPnP. People plug them in, see a picture, and call it a day. Search engines that index the internet seams, Shodan, Census, a few seedier scrapers, collect the crumbs. Aggregators scoop them up, rebrand the mess, and sell tickets to a parade of other people's lives. I told no one in my house. I didn't know how to explain the exact flavor of wrong. I was a kid. I also knew enough to be ashamed of the path I'd been on before I found that page. Shame is a bad partner for truth, but it drags you to the same mirror. So I did the only thing that felt possible with my mix of guilt and curiosity. I opened a new notebook and started taking notes like it was homework. I didn't screen record, I didn't save pictures. I wrote times, countries, filters, camera brands, anything that looked like a pattern. I taught myself to read M3U8 manifests and SDP lines so I would break fewer things as I moved. When a tile buffered, I read the error strings. When a stream 404'd, I looked at the path to see what the admin called their directories. It wasn't hacking, it was listening to a machine talk too loudly. It's one thing to understand how a machine works. It's another to realize how many people a machine can hurt just by working as configured. A man who had set up a camera to watch his front door had effectively invited 1,000 strangers to watch his wife come home. A daycare with a view parents-only webcam had, through negligence, built a window in a busy street. A teenager who opened her laptop to finish homework had unknowingly turned on a light in front of a crowd. Some streams had chat overlays. That part made me sickest. There were users who tried to warn, hey, you're on a site, cover your camera, but warnings scrolled off in seconds and the people on camera couldn't see the chat anyway. The rest of the comments ranged from dark humor to something that felt like the inside of a locked room. The mods silenced the worst. The worst always reform into new names. I decided I had to tell someone who could actually do something. I wrote a clumsy email to an address I found on a government site, our country's cert/CCERT, describing the page, the brand names, the way the site proxied streams. I expected nothing. I received a template reply thanking me for the report, a ticket number, and a note that reports are processed based on severity. Severity, I thought, is exactly what nobody agrees on until their own camera is involved. I kept looking. It wasn't morbid curiosity anymore, it was triage. I made a list of 36 IP addresses visible in the player URLs and ran whois to find their ISPs. Many were residential, harder to reach. A few belonged to small providers with an abuse at inbox. I sent carefully worded notes. Hi, I believe a customer's camera is reachable from the public internet without authentication and is being embedded on a third-party site. Can you notify the customer? I expected silence. I got silence. 3 days later, one replied, we have contacted the subscriber. A day after that, one of the tiles on the grid turned black and said offline. That tiny square felt like winning a war. I did not become a saint. I still made teenager decisions. But something in me shifted toward responsibility, which is just guilt with better posture. I started covering the camera on our family laptop with a Post-it. Mom asked why. I lied. Glare. And changed the router password when she wasn't home. A week into my notes, I saw a familiar desk, the same lamp, the same spiral notebook, the same scuffed edge. The study tile had changed angles, probably because the lid had been opened differently that day, but I recognized the geometry book. A page number was visible, 112, and a triangle I remembered drawing wrong 3 times. It was like seeing your own room on TV. The girl's headphones were around her neck. She clicked a pen. She didn't look up. Of course she didn't, I thought. She doesn't know there's an up to look to. I tried to be useful instead of only furious. The page footer had an email for advertising. I wrote, this site appears to be streaming cameras without consent. I am keeping notes and have reported to our national CERT. The message bounced. Different domains, new mirrors. The grid shifted, the chat relocated. The machine persisted. I learned how to spot the signatures of different camera brands. Foscam's default path, Dawa's clunky web UI, cheap baby monitors that exposed a JPEG refresh endpoint if you knew the right parameter. I learned the language of port 554 and how browsers cloak it in players. I learned how UPnP writes its own invitations for the world to knock.
It would be a better story if I had saved someone in a way that made the news. Reality gives fewer trophies. Mostly what I did was nag, send emails, collect ticket numbers, give my notes to adults who are paid to have authority. A local reporter finally wrote a piece about unsecured cameras after the CSERT forwarded my report with a pro forma paragraph. The article was careful, maybe too careful, but it moved a few needles. For a week, the site's grid shrank as cameras flipped to offline. Then it rebounded, because the internet is more like water than like marble. Block one stream, and it finds another channel. I still think about one address. I won't include details because I don't want to write a how-to for doing harm. But there was a moment, deep into a Saturday after midnight, when I realized a particular camera was attached to a public-facing domain that contained the owner's business name. The RTSP stream was exposed. The site had simply wrapped it so viewers didn't have to know how to paste the URL into VLC. The feed showed a workshop, benches, tools, a calendar with the month circled. Nothing dangerous, just privacy peeled back like paint. I considered making the call that would put police at a door at 1 a.m. in a town that would not thank me. I drafted an email instead, attached screenshots of error strings and offered a list. Change default password, disable UPnP, update firmware, place camera behind VPN, check Shodan to confirm it's gone. A reply arrived a day later. Thanks, fixed, and a stream winked to black. It didn't change the world. It changed their world. Here's the part I nearly left out. I went back to that site for months. Not daily. Not to gawk. To check if the pieces I'd tried to move stayed moved, and to remind myself why the work mattered. I learned to scan the thumbnail mosaic without actually watching. Black squares meant success. Motion meant another email. It wasn't healthy. It was also how I grew the part of my brain that now walks into any office and asks the most annoying question: what is accidentally public? Years passed. The site died and came back with another name, and then another. Authority seized a domain once. A mirrored copy materialized overnight, pointing to new hosts out of reach. I grew older, got a help desk job, then a network job, then a security job, the way a person who has stared too long at the ocean becomes a lifeguard. I learned to write reports that get read, not deleted. I learned to put plain English in subject lines and proof in attachments. I learned that people fix more when you assume they want to.
I also learned that harm doesn't need villains. It needs defaults. Default passwords, default router settings, default notions that if you can see a picture, it must be fine. A man once told me, while I balanced on a chair to unplug his camera, that he didn't believe in hackers because nothing he owned was worth stealing. I nodded and cut the power anyway. Your value is not the point. Your exposure is. I've skipped the worst details because I do not want to put them in your head. Yes, some tiles showed things that made me sit on the floor after I closed the tab and let the carpet scratch at my palms until I felt like I lived in my body again. I reported those too, in careful language, and never went back to check whether they disappeared, because sometimes the only way to do this right is to stop measuring your saves like points. If this were fiction, there would be a scene where I find the geometry girl's actual address and send a certified letter, and later receive a thank you written in violet ink. Reality is crueler and kinder. I never found her. More precisely, I never went far enough down the dark path of de-anonymization to have found her if it were possible. She remains a symbol for me of the internet's most basic flaw. It's always N+1 people in the room. You plus everyone you forgot to imagine. The most useful thing I did was write down a playbook. It's boring and it works. When you stumble into a mess like this, don't screen record or share links. You are not a distributor, you are a witness. Note the time, URL, camera brand in the player, any identifying strings. You're collecting leads, not souvenirs. Report to your national CERT or CSERT with as much specificity as you can without exposing victims. Include player URLs and how the site wraps streams. Notify ISPs if you can identify them from player URLs. No rants, give facts, and ask them to inform their subscriber. Contact the camera vendor's security team if their devices are involved. Many maintain abuse contacts and issue bulletins. Don't try to become a hero. Don't knock on doors. Don't play detective with partial clues. That's how good intentions become harm. Clean your own house. Change your router login from the sticker default. Turn off UPnP. Update firmware. Put cameras on a separate network. Use models with hardware shutters. Cover laptop lenses. Teach your family what the little green light means and what it doesn't.
I wrote that playbook first for myself, and then for anyone who'd listen. I've given it to friends, to a high school teacher who invited me to talk, to a community center that installed security cameras without realizing they'd put their daycare feed on the same subnet as public Wi-Fi. None of it is glamorous. All of it is a way to make sure some aggregator somewhere has one less square in its grid. 2 summers ago, a journalist called after stumbling on an old forum post I'd written under a name I no longer use. He wanted a quote, a hero, a mind-blowing tale. I gave him methods instead. How, not wow. He ran the piece anyway, and the comments were the same 2 kinds I've heard since I was a kid. This can't be real, and this is why I tape my camera. Both are wrong in different ways. It is real, and tape helps, but only if you fix the settings behind the tape. I still think about the grid when I walk the dog past apartment buildings at night and catch a slice of someone's life through a window. Curtains open, someone stirring pasta, another person asleep on a couch with a book folded on their chest. We're all a tile in someone else's mosaic, whether we know it or not. The difference between a street and a stream is consent. A window faces public by design. A camera should not. Every few months, I receive an email from someone who found my old notes and wants to hunt the people who run sites like the one I saw. I tell them what I wish someone had told me when I was 15. This isn't a war you can win with a sword. It's plumbing you fix with a wrench. Report, patch, educate, repeat. If you need catharsis, go for a run. If you need results, write a clear email with the IP and the path and the exact text of the error string. So yes, I'm the guy who covers the camera on your laptop and points out that your baby monitor's app wants you to forward a port. I'm annoying in exactly the way I wish someone had been annoying to the people on that grid. You cannot fix people who want to watch. You can shrink their audience to the size of their own mirror.
Occasionally, late at night, I still dream in squares. Most are black. A few are the colors of living rooms I'll never see again. In one, a hand reaches forward and tilts a screen closed. When it goes dark, the chat beside it looks suddenly small, like the shouts of kids across a field. In the morning, I open my laptop, see the little round lens at the top like an unblinking pupil, and touch the edge of the cover I installed years ago. It's muscle memory. It's also a prayer. If you take anything from this, take the simple. Set strong passwords. Update your routers. Put cameras on a network you can choke with one hand if you need to. Turn off what you don't use. Buy the model with the shutter you can hear click. Teach your kids that the light by the lens is not the same as consent, and that the first question you ask any device is, who else am I letting in? I wish I could end with a neat line about justice. The site I saw is down again today, and 10 others have learned to look less obvious. But I have an inbox of thank you replies from people who didn't know their front door view was hanging in public until someone told them. I have a memory of black squares replacing moving ones after a report found the right recipient. I have a life's work that grew out of a sick, ordinary click. And I have a sticker over my camera, ugly, curling at one corner, that reminds me of a desk lamp shining on page 112, a margin note in a hand I never met, and the way a room can be crowded even when you think it belongs only to you.